All right.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7:02. Do we need a roll call vote for a workshop, Mr. Smith?
Mr. President,
Okay.
yes.
So can you go ahead and do the roll call vote?
Manager Crafton,
Present.
Manager Duval,
Present.
Manager Cook,
Present.
Manager Pedersen, absent. President Ziegler.
Present.
We'll clear my screen in a second.
Okay, do we need a motion to approve the agenda as presented on the screen?
President Ziegler,
Manager Crafton,
I'll move acceptance or approval of the agenda as submitted.
I'll second. Any questions or comments on the agenda? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
On approval of the agenda, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen, Manager Cook,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0 with one absence.
I'm going to stop sharing. President Ziegler, managers, Manager Crafton, I believe you've already seen Miss Maurer, Kristine Maurer at Monday night's meeting. She is with Hennepin County Environmental Services, or are you with, yeah, one of those departments. At any rate.
Welcome again.
So she is here to present to the managers tonight in light of our previous conversation. She may have some very good information that is directly relatable to us at this time. So with that, you should be able to share your screen, Kristine, and I will turn it over to you.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Terry. Second.
For the
All right,
record,
we up and running?
Sure.
Does everyone see it? All right, great. Expand so I can see you guys' faces, so I'm not talking to a black screen. That's always not fun. All right, well, thanks so much for having me. In some cases, again, for those of you who already got to see and sat through my presentation on Tuesday, it's wonderful to see you again. Like Terry said, my name is Kristine Maurer, and I work for Hennepin County in the Department of Public Works, which also houses our Environment and Energy Department. And I work in what's called the Land and Water Unit, which is essentially the Soil and Water Conservation District. We were absorbed by the county a little over a decade ago, and so we serve the role of a soil and water district, plus a bunch of other things as a product of being part of the county at large. So with that, I guess I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today I'm going to be focusing on the specifics around our Hennepin County Habitat Conservation Programming, and I'm going to give you kind of a bird's eye view of everything with the hope that at some point myself or one of my colleagues can dive into even more details with you at a future date to continue building the relationship with the Watershed District. All right, so things I'm going to cover tonight include, again, high overview of our habitat conservation programming, which includes conservation easements, habitat improvement projects, biological monitoring. I'm also going to provide a brief introduction to our Hennepin County Natural Resource Viewer, which some of you may be familiar with, but it's had a lot of upgrades in the last year. And I'd like to just share a little bit of a teaser with that. And at some point, hope to come back and share more with you, all if that's of interest, and maybe even rope in one of our GIS specialists to come give a deep dive on how to use that map to its fullest potential. And then we'll wrap it up with some questions. All right. So first of all, I just wanted to kind of level set on what a conservation easement is. I'm imagining many of you have heard of them before, but just to make sure we're all on the same page. Conservation easements are voluntary but legally binding agreements between a landowner and an easement holder or entity. Typically, that entity is something like a conservation district or a nonprofit like the Minnesota Land Trust or another government entity that has the ability to hold a legally binding conservation agreement. Conservation easements in particular help to protect land from development, specifically to maintain open space, habitat, and rural character, to name a few things. But many people come to the table for conservation easements for a lot of personal reasons. They might have some sort of history or relationship with the property. They're trying to fulfill the wish of a loved one, or just really care about the future generations in Hennepin County and the wildlife that also requires all that habitat space. Easements can be for limited terms or they can be perpetual. The program that we offer at Hennepin County in conjunction with the Minnesota Land Trust focuses on perpetual easements. So those easements are forever. They can be sold and transferred and in some cases subdivided, but the terms of those easements will stay with that property in perpetuity. So that's really great that it's locked into that restriction of no development for forever, so that we know that the investments that were used to create the easement in the first place and all of the follow-up management that's done subsequent after that is really there for the long haul. Easements are pretty cool because they can be very flexible and compatible to what a landowner might need in a space. They can accommodate trails, they can accommodate a lot of different activities. So some people like to hunt or fish or ride an ATV or ride their horse on their property. And these things are all things that can be accommodated into the easement terms and make sure that people can continue to enjoy and utilize their properties in the way that they're hoping to. We also can allow for a certain amount of subdivisions to make sure that properties can be resold, and can also work with people to make sure that there are portions of the property that are developable. So if you want to have an exclusion area or a part of the property that's called a building envelope, where the terms are slightly less restrictive and you can have a house or retain a part of a property for future development of a barn or a shed or another outlot of some kind, that is also possible. All these things are kind of under the understanding that the more restrictions that you allow us to work on with you, the more value your easement has and the more that we're actually able to pay you. But the less you give up, so if you keep retention of more subdivisions and more building envelopes, things like that, then likely we're not going to be able to pay you as much. And at a certain point, it doesn't become valuable for us to establish the easement in the first place if too many things are left unprotected. Another thing that's really nice about easements is that landowners retain ownership and rights to sell, transfer, mortgage, and lease the land, and that they also don't require public access through our program. Some easement programs do require that the public is able to have access to them and to hunt them, but this is not a requirement through our program, which allows people to make those decisions for themselves, which I think is really nice. Some people have decided they want to allow that, and so they continue to have personal relationships with hunters that come onto their land, but those that prefer not to are not obligated to do so. I've covered a few of these things already, but conservation easements are a really helpful tool, particularly in a place like Hennepin County that is quickly developing and also is majority owned by private landowners. We all know that there's some really beautiful large cornerstone regional parks in Hennepin County and a smattering of other really wonderful open spaces that are held by cities and watershed districts, as well as the park district system, and even a few really cool spots owned by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. But other than that, much of the property in Hennepin County is owned by private landowners, which means that the conservation that can still happen in this county is in part really dependent upon working with private landowners and identifying people who would like to protect these places for forever. Another thing that's really beneficial for conservation easements, both for us and for the landowners that we might be working with, which could include a watershed district, is that because those lands are protected forever for habitat and conservation, they typically also have improved access to technical and financial support from staff like myself, but also for grants and other things that are offered through the state and federal governments. Like I mentioned before, these terms are flexible. So we, again, have the opportunity to work with people over a long period of time to make really nuanced decisions about what makes sense for them, and helps to both meet the goals of the landowner and also the conservation entity, which in this case, again, is the county and the municipal land trust. Landowners are also still required to pay property taxes on these properties. And so that's a really good thing for municipalities that we're able to establish these protected areas, but they're not losing tax base as a consequence of these easements. And there's also financial incentives for landowners. So I kind of alluded to this at the beginning that we're able to pay landowners to establish these conservation easements. Not only do we cover all the due diligence work that's required to establish the easements from kind of start to finish, but we also are able to provide a one-time payment to the landowner at the time of closing. And that payment is based on a formal easement appraisal that's performed, and it basically compares, like, got a bundle of sticks and this is your property with all the rights, and we assess how many sticks we took away by saying we are restricting the number of subdivisions or the number of places we can have a building, and based on kind of how many sticks you have left is what we can pay you for the easement. In addition to that, there are also potential federal tax incentives. So if a landowner were to choose not to take all of the compensation payment that we offer them, that's considered a donation because our partner is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, the Minnesota Land Trust. And so because that's viewed as a donation, there are sometimes federal tax deductions that can be utilized for conservation easements. And also we've had landowners successfully utilize some heirs transfer federal tax deductions as well through conservation easement establishment. So they've found ways to save money for their children in terms of transferring their properties by having conservation easements on the property ahead of time. All right, so just a quick overview of easements in the county. We have around 60 easements so far in the county. 11 of them are ones that we hold in conjunction with the Minnesota Land Trust. We have 4 easements that are relics from the old Hennepin Conservation District, 2 that are from tax forfeit purchases, and 10 that are in the Reinvest in Minnesota program, and 17 from the Permanent Wetland Preserve. We have 2 also that are expired Reinvest in Minnesota easements. That program no longer does temporary easements anymore either. So the 10 and 17 are the easements that will continue to hold in perpetuity, or that they'll continue to hold in perpetuity. We don't actually hold those as the county, but we do have a statutory obligation to help manage and monitor those easements. And so we kind of think of them as ours because we take care of them on a regular basis. We also have 7 flowage easements and 1 metro greenway easement. Sadly, when I was looking at my map, there are no easements that we hold or manage in your watershed. And there's also no projects we've completed through the Habitat Conservation Programming in your watershed. So this isn't a great number, and part of the reason I'm doing this presentation is to get the word out about our programming and figure out where there are ways and opportunities to work with all our partners across the county, because we're really excited about this programming and have a lot of great fundings behind it and support behind it, and want opportunities to work with everyone across the county. So hopefully this number will go up. Some of the services that we provide to our easement program, so folks that either have conservation easements through our programming with the Land Trust, or folks that are involved through our RIM and PWP programs, or our historic HWCD easements, include a handful of things. We conduct annual inspections on our easements to make sure that everything looks okay, that there hasn't been any boundary infringements or issues. We also do extensive biological monitoring where folks have worked with us and agreed to allow us on their property a little more frequently. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. We do habitat management planning, so we create and write documents to support the trajectories of these places to make sure that they have a good plan behind them, so that we're not just out there kind of doing things willy-nilly, but there's an actual strategy behind that work. We also execute habitat improvement projects. We have funding to support that work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And in some cases, we even help landowners do dump cleanups because we're not allowed to place conservation easements based on state rules over places that have dumps. And in Hennepin County, we've got a lot of farm middens and places where people have left old car chassis. And sometimes they're kind of in the way of the restoration work that we want to do. And so we'll oftentimes go in and help landowners clean that up ahead of time, so we can place the conservation easements over those areas as well and make sure that we have a much more contiguous and functional place to do our restoration and habitat improvement work. We also do a lot of coordination with partners like yourselves. So we work with cities and watershed districts to do projects, and also Fish and Wildlife Service, and let's see who else. And Three Rivers Park District are our main partners so far. We spend a decent amount of our time just connecting with landowners and neighbors through mailers and handouts, but also attending events and doing outreach and education events. We've had a lot of success with project development by doing these really intimate meetings with neighbors in their community. Finding that one person who's got really great connections to others is really, really valuable. We've had 3 sets of easement projects develop into corridors and easements close because of small, tight-knit community events like that. It's a very useful place to put our time. It's also a really great way to get to know people as individuals and hear their stories and why they're connected to their land. And we have games and lots of things that we can bring to keep those things interesting, and can also show up at already existing events. We've occasionally showed up at like open street events where we've been invited to come. So it doesn't have to be something special. It can be something that's already happening, and we'd be happy to show up. And then we also sometimes have to do enforcement actions, which thankfully has been very limited, at least in my tenure at the county. But occasionally we have folks that do things that are not in line with the easement terms, and can't need to make sure that that's mitigated for. All right, so our habitat conservation program, our partnership with the Land Trust began in 2018. And since then, we've now received 3 grants from the LaSarde Sam's Outdoor Heritage Fund in total of $9.1 million. So part of that funding goes to the Land Trust. They have all the attorneys and the legal staff that helps to navigate the due diligence process and writing of easement terms. So they get a handful of the funds, and that also is what helps to pay people for their easement if they choose to take a payment. And then the other portion of that money comes to Hennepin County directly, and we use that funding to implement our habitat improvement projects. So that's anything like a restoration of a wetland or an enhancement of a prairie or a forest. And so we share the responsibility of utilizing those funds. Since the program started, we have protected nearly 350 acres and have about 250 additional acres that are moving towards completion within this year and also next year. So we're moving at a steady pace, but I would love to ratchet this up a bit. We've got a really big goal from the County Climate Action Plan to establish quite a lot more acreage by 2040. And so the more partners that we can have in advertising and the more connections that we can get to the community to find those special people who want to protect habitat forever and improve habitat while they're at it is really important. All right, so I'll dive into a little bit more about our habitat improvement portion of our programming. We work on restorations and enhancements on permanently protected conservation lands, which includes a handful of things. It can be conservation easements on private lands, like I already had mentioned, but it can also include designated natural areas on public lands. So we've worked with a handful of cities at this point on park spaces or open spaces that are designated as natural areas, and also on permanently designated natural areas with other entities and nonprofits. Just to note, the picture up here is along the Prairie Bluff area in Eden Prairie. We've been working with the city of Eden Prairie for several years now to manage the only remnant prairie system left in Hennepin County. We've helped them with a lot of the invasive woody material removal. We've done seed collections with them, with volunteers, with students, and have also worked with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to help to enhance the seeding of the site as well. The picture on below is a project that we completed on a private easement, similar in scale to the 15,000 trees we planted on private easement just a month ago, but this was a little bit smaller scale, and we planted about 2,000 trees on this site. For our habitat improvement projects, we provide a handful of different services. We can provide technical advice and assistance to our partners and landowners. We can develop management plans. We can also do the project management and implementation of these projects, including contracting, and also couple them with outreach and events like the seed harvesting thing, and also working with you to gather additional support by providing letters of support, say for an additional grant that might help to amplify the work that's being done. This is a picture of a seed harvest that we did along the Prairie Bluffs, and then also wanted to share a little bit about this photo on the bottom, which is called the Tree Trek. We've done a handful of these now in the county, one with the Boys and Girls Club, and we are considering doing one with the city of Brooklyn Park. And it's a QR code based walk that is really easy to install. It's just little stickers that get placed on these small waterproof plastic lath that gets shoved into the ground, and you can put little details or images on these, but then also have a QR code for additional information. It doesn't have to be tree focused, that's where it started, but we've expanded this to include all sorts of different types of information, including little nuggets on wetlands and other things like that. All right, the other really cool part of our programming is the biological monitoring. We do biological monitoring for a variety of reasons. The first is to establish a baseline of the easements, the conditions that exist. The second is to just inventory what species are out there, because in a lot of cases we don't really know, and it's been a really long time already since the last county biological survey was completed in Hennepin County, so we're just kind of doing it on a small scale as best we can to make sure that we have really good up-to-date information. It's also really important for guiding our habitat improvement projects, make sure that we're getting the results that we want, we can quantify those results. And it's an amazing way to connect with people. We have gotten so many good photos from the efforts we've done through our biological monitoring that have resulted in social media posts and news articles and other things that really help to connect people with the environment, especially here in an urban place like Hennepin. And then finally, we were really excited to add to the network of data. There's a lot of other great places with great people collecting similar data, and we wanted to be a part of making sure that we were adding to that knowledge base. We are collecting information on all the things. We're doing vegetation plots on forests and prairies and wetlands. We're doing pollinator transect surveys for dragonflies, butterflies, and bumblebees. We're doing bird point counts, mammal trapping for small mammals, and also looking at tracks. We're doing reptile and amphibian cover boards and visual encounter surveys. And then also we're surveying for bats using acoustic monitoring devices. So trying to get as much information as we can on these places, and are eager for partners that want to work with us and doing more. All right, so I came up with a couple of ideas for how you guys can work with Hennepin or think about ways to protect habitat in your watershed. The first is really just doing what you're doing, which is to continue protecting water quality and habitat through your rules. The second is to consider doing habitat improvement projects on watershed held land or easements if you have them. We'd be excited to see what those projects are. And I'll provide this PowerPoint after the fact, but this is a link to this website, which is an intake form to indicate your interest in working with us. It's a pretty quick form. It shouldn't take more than 20 to 30 minutes to fill out. They're pretty condensed limits on what you can say here. This is really just to get it on paper, basically, so that we can have a good starting point and good conversation starting point with you to figure out exactly what we want to do. Kind of along those lines, the land doesn't necessarily have to be yours. If you want to work on behalf of and with a partner that exists in your watershed, like a municipality, you can work with them to have them fill out that intake form, or you to fill out the form on their behalf. But just to have that connection to some spaces in your watershed district to do work would be great. And then also to encourage landowner participation in the conservation easement program. And this last line links to another website, which will bring you to a Word document that is essentially a media kit. So you can take anything you want from this media kit and put it on your website, on your Twitter feed, or whatever resources you have available to reach the public and the communities in your watershed. And you can amend it as needed. There's really only a few notes. This logo right here is really important to Lessard Sams. They want to make sure that their money gets advertised. So if you are talking about any of the projects that we have in here, it's important to include the legacy logo. But other than that, all the information in here can be kind of copy and pasted to your liking into whatever platforms you typically use. And there's photos embedded and everything, so you should be pretty good to go. If you have any questions about how to use that, feel free to reach out to me, and I can also connect you with our communications specialist if there's any questions. All right, and the last thing I wanted to share with you is just basically the existence of our natural resource viewer, which is a very cool map that I've spent quite a lot of time over the last year revamping so that it has all sorts of bells and whistles. So when you click that link, you get pulled into a page that looks like this. You can search for a property by address or PID, or find a city, or find a water management area. And then you can zoom into the area, or it will zoom in for you. If you click on a parcel or enter a PID, you can turn on different layers of aerial imagery. You can look back to the 1940s if you want. There's a cool kind of compare contrast year to year tool in here. A new addition is we've included the public land survey as a background image, which is kind of fun. So for those of you who may not know, the public land survey was completed, oh gosh, when was that? In like the 1800s. So, and its purpose was mainly for forestry resources. You kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, but it is a really interesting snapshot of what people saw when they first were surveying the land for European settlement. And then there's a bunch of layers in here. So we've got a column for land layers. You can pull in parks, you can pull in bedrock geology, you can pull in DNR plan communities, and some things pop up and kind of go away as you zoom in and zoom out. And then similar for water. So there's drinking supply management areas, there's wetlands, there's all sorts of things in here. And there's also information that embedded in a lot of these resources to define what the layers mean. And if you click on a parcel, let's just practice one. A bunch of information will pull up here on the left-hand column, so you can click through and look at what might be embedded in that parcel. I guess I clicked on a lake, so there we go. So you can open these up and see what more specifics about what layers are inside this. So there's tons of stuff in here, and I don't have time to even graze the surface really, and think this probably deserves its own 20-minute ordeal with you all. But it is a really great resource, and I continue to encourage you to poke around in there and figure out what might be useful to you. We also do a feedback session on our map every fall. So I'd be interested to include you guys all in our survey to see how we can continue to improve and make this resource better for the partners that utilize it. I think with that, I'll take any questions if there's time. I think I might have gone over a little bit. Oops.
Kristine, could you give us the website address one more time? It just flashed by so quickly.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and I'll
There
make
we
sure
are.
to send this PDF of the presentation to Terry so that he can share it back out to all of you, and make sure those resources are embedded. I almost forgot to mention this on Tuesday, but our staff has also created a handful of, I've got my background blurred on, so we've got a handful of resources that we built for bird and bat house, taking care of bird and bat stuff in your backyard, and also some handouts related to our habitat conservation programming. And recently we published our very first magazine, which is, of course, this is going to be super blurry for me. Sorry about that. That really outlines a lot of the projects that we have completed with landowners. So it's a really great tool to, if someone's interested, to just show them like, hey, these are some examples of the habitat projects that they've completed, and these are some of the examples of easements that have been done, and quotes from people who have done them and why they did them. So I'm happy to mail some of that stuff to your office, as well as send you some digital links, or digital versions of those that you can print off yourselves if you'd like.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook.
yes, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Maurer. That was a great presentation. I'm sure all of us have taken some notes because what you presented may impact a couple of things that we're looking at doing. So hopefully we'll be back in touch one way or the other. This is a great resource, and I also hope that we will be incorporating links, etc., into our own website so we can help share your information. So thank you again very much for making the presentation to us.
Oh man, thank you. That's wonderful news to hear that you're interested in sharing it and working with us, hopefully in the future.
Kathleen, I've got a question. How much, or how do you determine how much to pay for a conservation even? Conservation,
Yeah, for conservation easement. Yeah,
Easement,
great question. So while we're going through the due diligence process before closing, we have, well, actually, let me see if I have my little map. I do, yes, okay. So we go through a lot of steps before we get to the point of closing. And even before closing, we have what's called an option for purchase. So this is where we offer folks the amount of money that we can pay them. But before that, we do a whole bunch of stuff, which includes making sure that we have easement terms, and the easement terms are going to set those restrictions. So when I was talking about the bundles of sticks, this is the bundle that you can do whatever you want with your property. And the easement term is going to take some of those sticks away. So you can do a little bit less with your property. You might not be able to subdivide it as many times, or you might not have the ability to build a mini mall out there anymore. And so you've given up a few of the rights to your property. And the appraisal is going to take into account the terms of the easement, so how many sticks you gave away. And it's also going to take into account the survey of the property. So we do a formal survey of the easement boundary, which may or may not be equivalent to the parcel boundary itself. That can be, it can be equivalent, but oftentimes it's not if people want to exclude areas for houses, etc. And then it also looks at things like comps. So it's very similar to a traditional real estate appraisal, but it's done by somebody who is a third-party contractor, non-biased, certified easement appraiser. So they are specialized in kind of making that determination of how many sticks you're giving up, basically. But other than that, it's very similar to a traditional real estate assessment.
So just for an example, if we have wetlands that we've already restored, that probably doesn't make a lot of sense because we've already given up those sticks, right?
Sure, yeah. And wetlands are an interesting case too, because they're already quite well protected by the Minnesota Wetland Conservation Act. In addition to the 401 rules through the federal government. So it's one of those places where you're not going to be giving up a lot of sticks anyways, because it's already pretty protected. And so the justification to put an additional easement on that would be a little bit challenging to begin with. But if you had, say, another handful of acres adjacent to your wetland that were upland or included some sort of stream corridor or something like that, and you decided you were willing to give up your ability to subdivide or put numerous houses out there, then that would be an instance in which an easement might make more sense. And in that case,
Okay.
we would probably take all of it if you wanted, because it makes management a lot easier. So we do oftentimes place easements over other easements if it makes sense. But it does have to make sense that we're adding benefit or adding restriction. So in some cases, we'll just try to abut our easement with an existing easement.
Thank you. Do any other managers have any questions or comments? Okay, it sounds like, yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was very informative and timely. So, yeah, hopefully we'll be in touch soon.
Sounds good. I'll look forward to it. And in the meantime, I'll provide Terry with the resources that I talked about tonight. And I hope you all have a good rest of your meeting. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you, Kristine.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kristine. I'll talk to you soon. Okay. Get the agenda here again.
So it looks like the next thing is the preliminary discussion on the budget and levy.
Yeah, President Ziegler, managers. So in light of our earlier discussion, what I'd like to do is combine 4 and 5 together. I want to run through tab by tab what we are doing with each project. Most of them, I've got a few yet to update. I have updated everything to be consistent back to around 2018 with what Redpath has in their accounting, what Smith Partners has in their invoices, and what Bar Engineering has in their invoices. So that's what we've been working on. And I figure it'll also double as you'll be able to see where we're at with the status of the project. So make this smaller so I can actually get to that tab. That's the problem with this. This should be it. So go back several tabs where we're starting. Well, we'll just start with table 1 again, which you've all seen before. But remember, each of these line items relates to a tab. So we have a tab. Administration is kind of bulked into one larger one. But what I'd like to do is start with our projects and programs, starting with our Bluff Creek tributary, and bring you through status of the project, what has been spent to date, and what we are anticipating going out. So kind of where we're at with each project. So I'm looking for. All right. So this is Bluff Creek tributary. This was BT3. This is coming off of Audubon Road at the Chaska-Chanhassen border. It's just south of those townhomes that are on Audubon Road, right across the street from where the newer Lennar development is going in. So again, what we've set these tables up to be, the top table was our anticipated what we were going to spend. The bottom table is the updated spent to date on it. So we are, this project is closed out now, isn't it, Engineer Sobek? I believe, oh, we have one more. This is our last year with it, right? And then we close it out at the end of this year. So we'll have some more 2023 expenses that aren't showing up in here, but that project will be done after this. Pioneer Wetland, again. So this one is really odd to try and get your head around, because when the estimate was put together, it originally just considered the wetland restoration and did not take into consideration the acquisition of the property. The acquisition was put in after the fact, and with acquisition and demolition, it was $587,869 for the 3 parcels that were out there. The construction itself, though, came in significantly under the budget that we thought we would. So while we are 300,000 roughly over budget on this, we did recoup. So I just actually received notification from Mauser that our audit is completed and that they will be distributing our grant funds shortly. So this will be offset. This project is in the maintenance, and we do have through 25, we have ongoing maintenance on this project. So again, there'll be additional expenses in 23 that are yet to show up on this. Bluff Creek B5 is the headwaters. It's the upper Bluff Creek reach right here. So really, these are the expenses. This was our anticipated expense. This is our expense to date. We are really just doing the design at this point, but this is one of those where we're trying as best we can to align it with the city of Chanhassen's Galpin Road project. We also, this was expanded to include the wetland that was on the west side, which is the headwaters of Bluff Creek. And we're looking at working with Carver County, MnDOT, and the city of Chanhassen on the culvert replacement. These next three are not done, B3, B4. These are those areas, if you're familiar with the Audubon Motor Complex, this is that stretch of Bluff Creek behind those. So these are programmed for the 27 and 28 years to be working on them. So nothing has been done at this point on these projects. Lake Riley Alum Treatment, we came in pretty close to budget on this, or what we anticipated budget was. This is completed. Joe Bischoff from Bar Engineers finished up the analysis, and that provided it to me. I'm now reviewing it with any final comments for him. Rice Marsh Lake Alum, we initially anticipated doing our second dose in Rice Marsh Lake next year. It has responded pretty well. We aren't seeing its degradation yet, so we will likely be moving that out to 25 or 26. But we'll work with Joe Bishop on that to decide that. The other part is cancel that. The other part of this to note with alum treatment, where did I just go? The prices, our estimated increase was not adequate to cover what the true inflation of alum was. And it's not the aluminum sulfate itself that's so costly. It's actually the sulfuric acid that is used to make it has been way more expensive than anticipated. So by delaying it another year, we're also hoping that we'll see that scarcity disappear. So Rice Marsh Lake water quality phase 1. So this is one of the things we really want to do is get the nomenclature to work. This is RML 12A. This is the Kraken, the rain garden in the city parkland on the north side of Rice Marsh Lake. The project is substantially complete. We do have the 3 more years of maintenance going on, and then Staff Maxwell has got the monitoring equipment installed, and we are doing continuous monitoring on the outflow and grab samples on the inflow. So we should have good data over that over the upcoming years. Reach, again, this is the nomenclature. So E and D3, this is Lower Riley Creek. This is completed and it is closed out. We are moved to close it out 2 meetings ago, wasn't it, Engineer Soviak?
There's their final release of retainage, which will be coming through in August.
Okay. So this will go off the books. Again, came in within the anticipated budget, with the exception of the road that had to be moved. So there was a change order in it from the original. So this is Upper Riley Creek. This is the anticipated schedule. 2.9, 3 million on it. Thus far, we have put together the feasibility and we are doing design right now. I anticipate seeing some expenses within administration because we are working on the cooperative agreement with Chanhassen on it. But if you look at it, then our timeline initially was that we would be doing construction this fall and winter, finishing it up next year, and then have our 3 years of maintenance. Middle Riley Creek Bear Path is substantially complete. We do have, I'm sure it'll come as no surprise, we do still have some things to address with the Bear Path folks. They're working with the title company right now. Hopefully that will be resolved shortly. Scott and I'm blanking on the engineer's name that was out there with it. She just emailed today.
Jessica?
Jessica, thank you. Did a walkthrough this spring. It's looking good. A lot of the maintenance will be taken over by the crew there. So again, we have it programmed out to 25 for final restoration to occur. St. Hubert's is substantially complete. They have 1 more year of maintenance in it, but actually they now have 2 more years of maintenance. They have several trees they had to replace. The warranty starts over, and there was an area that they were going to convert to prairie on the hillside by the soccer field that they did not adequately address the POA, the bluegrass, and the bluegrass is taken over again. So they're redoing that this year. Now, this is another one where we have gotten some of our grants back, and we are waiting for the only one we're waiting to get back now actually is the Clean Water Fund grant, the Bowser grant. Lake Susan Alum, this is just sitting here as a placeholder. We have a lot of other things we want to address first. This it was in our plan, 310,000 as an estimate. We were thinking of doing it 22, 4, and 6. Be good to see a number of our other projects completed, and we have recently sampled the wetland that is south of Lake Susan Park, because and the release rates in that are extremely high, the phosphorus release rates. Okay, Scott, you're gonna have to help me out because these ones always get confused. I think Lucy A1 is on Lake Lucy Boulevard, and Lucy A34 is in the neighborhood that is to the west, or on the east side of Lake Lucy. Lake Lucy A1, they're actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Engineer Sobek, but there is a feasibility study that was done for this, or was there not? Did we just do the sampling?
It's just the sampling for this
Just the
location.
sampling, okay. So this one, we were unable to find an entity that represents the homeowners association, and the area that we were looking at treating was in the homeowners association lot. So that we kind of put on the back burner and moved on to some other more pressing projects. Lucy A34, and I don't even have a table of expenses. Again, this is one where we were going to work with 4 different homeowners, landowners. We were going to install a treatment device. Was it spent lime we were looking at doing there? Spent lime facility. We were going to do it in conjunction with the road project that the city had going on in there. But at that time, the 2 downstream property owners, where we would actually be discharging into an existing channel, did not want to be involved in the project. So without the participating landowners, nothing came from that. I understand from when we had our Lake Association Summit that these properties have changed hands. So the possibility may exist that this would come back. This was a good project, and it would have gotten a good load reduction on it. Purgatory Creek Conservation Area. Yeah, placeholder at this point. It's worked really well for us for cart management the way it is. The city is working with Wank and now Stantec to finalize the design. There's a very good chance we would look at it through opportunity projects repair and maintenance fund, but that would be their project. The larger thing to work out there is right now we are the permit holder through the DNR and the Army Corps of Engineers. As part of any agreement to do this, we would want that permit transferred over to the city. Lotus Alum, again, with the alum prices, while we thought we would be doing our second treatment, 23 and 24, we did not, or 23, we aren't going to do it this year. We are going to look at next year for the second alum dose treatment on Lotus. Silver Lake, this is where I haven't gotten to adding all the data in. Silver Lake is substantially complete. We entered into a separate agreement with Minnesota Native Landscapes. It was a prairie restoration to complete the work that the prior contractor did not, for reasons I think you're all aware. So they've been doing a good job. That should be, again, finished up 25 with all the maintenance. Lotus Lake Watershed Project, there has been a fair amount of money spent on engineering feasibility at this point. This is the one where we looked at LL1, LL3, and LL5, and LL8, correct, Scott? We combine them into one overall project, looking at a more regional approach. The city of Chanhassen knows they have a number of different road projects coming up. I think it's a good opportunity to form a partnership with them and actually do a more regional facility. So that's what the design is at this point. I'm looking at that. In all likelihood, North Lotus Lake Park will be the bulk of the improvements, but we are also looking at Frontier Trail near the Frontier Association land. There are two little ponds that are adjacent to Frontier Trail that are not adequately sized to provide much benefit. So we're looking at what can be done there. And then also looking at Greenway Park, which is off of Powers Boulevard. So there'll be more coming on that. But again, this project was slated to be worked on for the construction to actually occur the 25-26 years, have 3 years of maintenance through 2029. Duck Lake Partnership, that will come off the books in 2025. Clearly, this hasn't been updated, but we have spent the first 3 years on that. This is Starring Lake project. Didn't score terribly high, didn't make it into this 10-year schedule. This is Lotus Lake 9, the only other remaining Lotus Lake area. We did put a placeholder for 2028, but we really want to see where the other Lotus Lake Conservation or Lotus Lake Watershed project goes to. STL1, same thing. Red Rock Lake, help me out with this one, Scott. This was in the park closer to the high school, correct? What we were looking at here.
I would have to go back and check. I'm
I'd
drawing
have
a
to
blank
look.
on its location.
However, we have recently had conversations with Eden Prairie School District and involved the city of Eden Prairie in on that. And again, this might be an area where a more regional approach makes sense as the Eden Prairie School District continues to have improvements to the property rather than piecemealing a new stormwater management facility each time. They're looking at, can they do a large reuse, for instance, to irrigate their entire property? Would it be possible to involve Red Rock Lake Park into that? Oh, this is Red Rock. Never mind. Sorry, I was thinking wrong. So Red Rock, but still, I don't know where this one would be. This is in the northeast portion of the lake, pretty sure. Kerber Ravine, this is an example of where a little bit of time, removal of leaf cover, and Public Works doing their INI has kind of resulted in a channel. This was not originally actually it's not in our plan at all. We would need to do a plan amendment to do this. We have done a feasibility study for it. There is a significant amount of sediment that comes through the system, and it also has really poor hydraulics, the way the system is formed. This is the channel that outlets from Kerber, goes to Sunrise Estates beach lot. The rest of these, again, Purgatory Creek 1 and 2, this is between Starring Lake, Lake Riley this is south of Lake Riley, right? At the outlet of Lake Riley.
This,
Lake Starring Lake, rather.
PC1, yeah, Starring Lake. They're downstream of Starring Lake.
Yep. So those are right now placeholder for 26, but again, we've got another projects. So that is just a quick rundown of the projects at the continuation, as well as the August 2nd meeting. We'll have a full budget for you, showing how we propose to program these in over the next 5 or 6 years.
Okay, any questions or comments by any of the managers?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
so first of all, thank you for the update and look forward to getting a complete budget and project update. I was wondering, is it possible for you to add a link in each one of the sheets that would take us to the map to show us where that particular project is located?
Yeah, we can do that, or I could even just do a cutout and put a map in the page. So yes, one way or another, we can have it linked to that. That's easy.
That would be great, and along with our previous conversation, be looking to see what you think timelines might be for these projects. So thank you. Thanks for the presentation.
Mr.
Manager
President,
Duval?
so I think this is for Administrator Jeffrey. So you went through the details of, and it really is helpful seeing that going from how it originated in the original 10-year plan to more detailed as the projects get developed, and then how they filter into the current budget. So I guess I got a couple questions here, but one is, you had several projects that look like they were in the process or have already been closed out or in the process of being closed out. So if you have a project that comes in $100,000, it's being closed out and it looks like it came in $100,000 under the whatever the final year we're in, that final budget. What happens to that 100,000?
President Ziegler,
Yes.
Manager Duval. Yeah, so that's one of those that at the end of the year, when we do the budget, we will either roll it into the reserves, or if we have another project that we know we're over budget on, we would transfer it over there. But that's one of those where we bring it to the board and decide what we want to do with that money.
So I guess the second question, and this is something that I've been struggling with, we've been struggling a little bit, or I personally on the budget or audit and finance committee, is we're carrying something like over $7 million in cash in our current cash accounts. And our current levy for the last few years has been about $3.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the disposition of that differential? Are those projects that are layered in to be happened in the final years of our 10-year plan?
Yeah, so President Ziegler, Manager Duval, a lot of those that is carryover either from projects where during COVID we didn't It's projects that were programmed for 23, for instance, that did not get constructed in 23, so it's there for 24. So that money is there in that project fund, but it's not coming off the books because we didn't do that work. That makes sense?
But the project's still scheduled, it just got pushed out.
Correct.
So is it, I mean, is it a bad generalization to say that we have about $3.5 million of projects that are still in the pipeline that we've received cash for, that the projects either haven't been completed or they haven't been started?
I'm not going to speak to the exact number, but yeah, I
Yeah.
think that would be a fair assessment that money is sitting there waiting for the project to actually move forward as was thought it was going to.
Okay,
Any other questions or comments from any of the managers?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
so follow up a little bit on Manager Duvall's statement. Well, first of all, as we had gone through the budget, monies that we had accumulated for a particular project were generally listed as a budgeted amount for that year, knowing that in a particular year we might not spend the entire amount that was in the budgeted amount. Okay, that's just historically, I think, how we have done the budget. So we would end up with this column at the end of the year called carryovers, and where we would decide, yes, project still ongoing, it needs the money that was allocated, and that just got rolled over to the following year. In some cases, as Administrator Jeffrey has stated, we close out a project, there's money left over, and as he stated, it either goes into the reserve, or if needed, we have to allocate it to a project or an expense that was over budget, because under the law, we cannot spend more than what we have budgeted for that year. So that's just one of the nuances. And then the second part of that is the fact that my understanding was the district gets paid 2 times a year when the property taxes come in. Now, my understanding is we probably could say you just got to pay us all at day one, but I believe historically we get paid sometime, maybe a month after all the property taxes are collected by the counties, and the counties send us, our amount. The problem is that the last payment, is so close to the end of the year. That's October, right? And I don't remember, but it's October. So we're getting a chunk of our money way late in the year. So my understanding is we have historically kind of reserved an amount equal to roughly half of what we think we'll spend in the year, so that we have it to spend it, during that second half of the year while we're waiting for, the second half of our money to come in November. I think it's like November, or maybe even a little later. And correct me if my understanding is wrong, but that's why we end up with, then we get the big payment, right? In December 1 or something like that. So that's why we end up with this huge chunk of cash, in addition to the reasons Administrator Jeffrey said, was the fact that in some of these years we didn't spend the money for, several different reasons. So we were kind of we were always concerned, are we going to have the cash to pay our bills? And are we going to have the money if something happens, can't collect a bunch of taxes? We will have something to operate on, in the next year, at least carry on some kind of operations should the unforeseen happen, which today it hasn't happened. I mean, I think COVID would have been the example where maybe, the counties never collected the money and maybe we wouldn't have gotten it, but that never happened. We had plenty of cash. So I believe my understanding is correct. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I yield back.
Administrator Jeffrey, is there anything more in this presentation that you need to go through?
Nope, not at this time unless you have further questions. Try and bring up the,
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I just have one follow-up question. Minister Jeffrey, do the numbers in the, I guess, anticipated or projected, do they match our plan as we adopted it, or is there some changes to that?
President Ziegler?
Yes.
Yeah, Manager Cook. So let's pick one and kind of show you how that is working. We'll go B5. So we have our 10-year plan estimate, what we thought it was going to be in the 10-year plan. And then we'll have our CIP number, and then we'll have our adjusted for the construction. And it's so no is the short answer. We update the table for these numbers, and that updated information is reflected in table 1.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this particular topic? It looks like the next thing on the agenda is to adjourn. I can't believe we're done so quickly.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
I move that we adjourn.
do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is Mr. Smith still on?
Yes.
Any further questions or comments before we vote? Hearing none, there's a motion to adjourn and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Yeah, have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
See you Wednesday.
Thanks.
Night all.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.